Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
There is no off season in fantasy football. What's going on, everybody? It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Welcome to season 4 of your favorite fantasy podcast. I am Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined as always by my main man, the analytical assassin, Dwain McFarland. You know him, you love him, you read him over at PFF and EstablishTheRun.com. Dwain, it's been a minute. We took a little time to kind of decompress after the season and clear our heads, but it's 2021. I can't believe it's our 4th season of this. How are you, my friend?
Dude, I'm awesome. Just got back from a trip skiing, so we were up in Durango all last week, myself and my family. And it's been, we love football. We could talk about football all the time, but it has been kind of nice, just taking, a month, I don't know, how long has it been? Probably 2 months since we've been on the air, but like 6 weeks without really thinking a lot about football. I don't know if you've ever played poker. You probably have something like that. This would be analogous to, but it's like you step back from it for a little bit, and then when you come back to it, you're just refreshed. You see the big picture, and that's just really where I'm at. So I'm excited to jump back in. I can't wait for 2021. We've already got a lot of big news breaking. So yeah, man, I'm super excited to be back.
Yeah, it's going to be a great year here on the Hustle. A lot of big things in the works, including these snazzy T-shirts you see right here. If you follow us on Twitter at FF Hustle, it's the pinned tweet. Our good pals at Viridian Global made hats and hoodies and shirts and whatever else. And you can see the hat right here over my shoulder, one of the many. So what we're going to do today is we're going to get into free agency. And of course, every podcast in America right now is talking about free agency, but we really do want to give it that fantasy spin. Who's a winner? Who's a loser? How it's going to impact your drafts, how it impacts your dynasty teams, where Dwain kind of sees some opportunities going forward. So let's jump right in here, Dwain, at the running back position. Give me your biggest winners from the free agency period.
Yeah, I think interestingly for me, Drake, in this particular category, the biggest winners and losers, they're not really the guys that are changing teams. Really, that's kind of a theme throughout all of these for me. But if you want just my top 3, I think Aaron Jones is the biggest winner. And I know we can kind of jump into it more here in a minute. But losing Jamaal Williams, his key role was he would come in and he would spell Jones, but he also would take up some certain, long down and distance situations, right? Well, AJ Dillon at this point, he's basically just a banger, right? So there's less of a role. I do think that Dillon's going to have a role, but I think there will be games where Aaron Jones just can completely take over, right? So if the Packers are behind or if it's really close, we could see way less of Dillon. And without having Jamaal Williams there to eat into some of those passing downs and a player that can take over 2, 3, 4 drives a game from Aaron Jones, I don't think Dillon's going to be that kind of player. So I think that's going to be huge for Aaron Jones. James Robinson, so far, this could easily change, right? They have no draft capital in James Robinson, but all they've done is sign Carlos Hyde. I think we've kind of learned our lesson. Hyde has shown a flash, in the past, but really, he's just a backup at this point. So I don't see him as a huge threat to James Robinson. Things could change. You do have Urban Meyer. He did coach Carlos Hyde. I know there's that tie there, but I think James Robinson showed enough. I think the biggest challenge for Robinson, Drake, will be, do they draft a back? Right. Which could easily happen. If they draft a back, in like the 6th or 7th round, I don't care as much, but especially if they spend a pick like in the 2nd or 3rd round, that could definitely be trouble for James Robinson. And then I think Melvin Gordon, he's getting up there in age. I think he's 28 as of like next month. So he's not exactly a spring chicken, but losing Phillip Lindsay, who is a talent, right? He forces his way onto the field. I don't know that Denver has anybody on their roster now that can force their way on the field like Phillip Lindsay did. They brought in Mike Boone, so that could be interesting. They still have Royce Freeman. But I think overall that situation just improved for Melvin Gordon.
Any losers that you saw come out of free agency?
Yeah, man. Josh Jacobs, man. Kenyon Drake. With all the needs that the Raiders have, why do they go spend that kind of money on Kenyon Drake? Josh Jacobs, for me is the number one. And then I think, this one could go either way, but this is kind of the flip side, right, of the Aaron Jones deal. It's not that we think Jamaal Williams is this great player, but you've got Jamaal Williams signing in Detroit. You've got a new coach who says he wants to be smash mouth with, Dan Campbell. You've got Anthony Lynn as your offensive coordinator, right? He used to be the running backs coach for Dallas years ago. I'm just not excited about the overall direction of the Lions offense, as a whole. I know we'll get into the Goff Stafford thing later, but it's a cumulative effect for DeAndre Swift. And the other component of it really is just where he's going in drafts, right? He's typically going in the second round of most drafts right now. There've been times where I've seen him sneak into the first round. And I love the talent. And so I could change my mind on this one, but right now it's just kind of like a buyer beware. I need to really dig more into DeAndre Swift. Love him as a player, but I am a little bit concerned. I think Jamaal Williams is going to take away, a few series here and there. It's going to be really problematic if all of a sudden Williams starts playing a lot of the passing down, because I think that's where Swift could make a ton of money, right? From a standpoint, of really performing from a fantasy perspective.
So let's dive in a little deeper to a lot of these guys. And we're going to start with, I guess, the biggest fish in the running back pond, and that's Aaron Jones. He stayed in Green Bay on a 4-year, $48 million deal, coming off back-to-back 1,000 yards rushing seasons. And again, guys, he finished as RB5 in PPR leagues. We really did expect him to test these fantasy free agent waters, but instead, he's back with the pack. So, Dwain, the real question here is, you mentioned it briefly a second ago, now that Jamaal Williams is out of town and he's sharing with last year's second-rounder A.J. Dillon, Jones has been real money finding the end zone. He's got 25 touches over the last 2 years. Like, is this role going to continue, or he's going to be that goal line guy? Could we see Dillon taking that, or is he just going to make it up now as a pass catcher?
Yeah, I think he's going to easily make it up as a pass catcher, right? And they could spell him a little bit more. But I think that's still TBD, right? He's been so good down in and around that area that, is there a real need, to take him off the field? And I know we can't always assume that coaching is going to be rational, but I think Aaron Jones right now is being underdrafted. He's going after Nick Chubb. He's going after Jonathan Taylor. I think I totally get why he would be right there in that same group. He's kind of in a tier with Zeke and some of these other guys. And then below that, you got Akers and Swift and Antonio Gibson. So, he's not super far off, but I think for me, Aaron Jones could easily be, top 4 or 5, this year. So I think he's priced a little bit low for me where I'm seeing him go right now. He's not a huge discount from where he should be, but I think he's going to more than make up for what he's going to lose by picking up all of that passing down work. And I do think there will be games where we just won't see A.J. Dillon. We just won't see him. Jamaal Williams could come in and spell Aaron Jones in really every facet, right? Dillon can't do that. Now, Dillon could progress, right, as a player. Sure. So that's what we would have to keep an eye on. But nobody coming out of college really thought Dillon is this guy that you're really going to use in the passing game. So it would be a pretty big evolution, right, for Dillon to turn into that.
I want to talk about a value, Dwain. We're looking at underdog ADP. Aaron Jones is coming off the board on average at a little over pick 11. So at the end of the first round, you're getting a guy who, again, we talked about back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, RB5 last year. That's incredible value. So we'll see what shakes out. We're talking about Jamaal Williams leaving town because he's moved to Detroit, where everyone's favorite offseason running back to hype DeAndre Swift resides. Many in fantasy are saying, oh, it's no big deal, blah, blah, blah. We see things a little differently here on the Hustle because Jamaal Williams is no slouch. He's excellent in pass pro. And what we love to focus on here is what situations is this offense going to be in? Now, this is going to be a really bad team. Dwain, I think you'd agree with me here. Their skill position players are going to be up there with the worst in the league. Let's talk about game script. Let's talk about how many goal line touches we see him getting. And where's the talent around him? They're going to be getting shellacked in every game.
Right. I think this is one we're just going to have to really try to read the tea leaves on. We're going to have to try to pick up as much information as we can on how they're going to divvy up these roles. It's not like they gave him a ton of money, but anytime you have a new coach come in, you got a new coordinator coming in, and then they make a signing, like this, And given the fact that everything you just said, I mean, this is a guy that took time away from Aaron Jones. Well, we have no clue if DeAndre Swift can be anywhere near as good as Aaron Jones, and Jamaal Williams was keeping him off the field in certain instances, or at least spelling him. Mm-hmm. So I think it comes down to coaching philosophy as well. And we just don't know a lot about Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's never even, he's never been a coordinator. We don't have anything to go off of, to go back and look at and say, and, Anthony Lynn has, and we know that Anthony Lynn has shown a tendency to use more than one back, but he's also had years where he was willing to lean on one back. So he's really shown both. So I think we're just going to have to try to figure this one out as the preseason goes. I'm not saying, just don't draft DeAndre Swift. I'm definitely not saying that. I'm just saying this is just kind of a little bit of a caution sign, because it really depends on the role he takes. What you don't want to see is, for whatever reason, he takes on, the passing down and the long down and distance, in the 2-minute offense.
Right.
That will really suck, because they're going to have to use that a lot, to your point, because they're going to be terrible. And you're not going to score a lot of touchdowns in this offense. So the value is going to come from the running back that gets to be on the field to catch the passes the most often. That's who's going to have the value in this offense. Swift is obviously the more electric option. He's the guy that hopefully, they're going to want to have on the field all the time. If DeAndre Swift wins those two roles, right, and Jamaal Williams is just spelling him like every third or fourth series, you could live with that. But again, you're not getting a guy like Aaron Jones last year that was playing in a prolific offense and was able to overcome that, right? You're going to be playing on a team that probably will be one of the bottom 5 or 6 in scoring touchdowns this season. It's just all the factors combined for me, Drake. And you hate it, right? Because I love the player. Like, I own DeAndre Swift in Dynasty. It's like I want him to be good, but there's just so many things stacking up, right? You lose Golladay, you lose Marvin Jones. You've got Jared Goff instead of Matt Stafford. You got unknown entities at head coach. You've got an old school offensive coordinator. There's just a lot of things going on in Detroit that just scare me with Swift.
100%, man. I'm with you. Another running back who re-signed was Chris Carson. He missed 4 games last year and continually seems to be banged up, but the Seahawks did re-up him on a 2-year deal for $14.6 million. That's pretty good cash for a running back. Carson is talented, evident by his near 100 catches and 27 total touchdowns since 2018. But Rashad Penny is going to be back. He's going to be a little healthier. They got a cast of 100 other randoms behind him. So, Dwain, how much are you valuing Carson for 2021? Where are we kind of slotting him in the running back hierarchy?
Yeah, I think he's an RB2 right now, easily, just based on the volume we think that he's going to get. I think he's going to be the lead back. Rashad Penny hasn't really proven a lot to us yet, at this point. So we'll have to watch the draft. We'll have to see what they do. But I think Carson is easily the top back on the team. So I think it puts him in that RB2 territory. And this is another one that we're going to have to kind of watch. You've got a new offensive coordinator, there as well. So we'll have to see, how they're planning on utilizing these guys. But I have no problem drafting, Chris Carson, as my RB2, especially if at the value that you're probably getting on him right now. I don't know if you have his ADP up in front of you.
I do. Yes. He's going on Underdog, which I would say is, a lot of people are using that right now. Some probably pretty sharp guys. He's going off the board at pick 53.
Yeah, I have no problem. I have no problem with that. Mm-hmm. Depending on how I think that actually opens up some potential doors in how you're going to construct your roster. Because here's the thing with Chris Carson, I'm not fearful that he loses his starting job, right? My gut says he's probably going to get at least 50% of the work, if not more, right? On a team that we know wants to run the ball, right? We've already heard Pete Carroll multiple times. I mean, that's why Schottenheimer's out, because he doesn't want to air it out. So I think Carson is going to be stepping into a nice role. He's going to be used plenty. Obviously, you have to watch out for injury. The guy, he takes a lot of tough collisions. So that the main thing is probably going to be the injuries. But I think Chris Carson, for where he's going, is solid value. If you get him as your RB2, or if for some reason you load up on receivers and you take him as your RB1. I don't love him as my RB1, but I think where he's going right now gives you some flexibility on how you can approach a draft.
I think we can already see the wheels turning here of, say you grab a running back in the first, like you said, then you snag, rounds 2, 3, 4, you get maybe a high-end tight end, a couple of receivers. You come back in the 5th round, and Chris Carson, Melvin Gordon are both on the board. Looking at ADP right now, There's nothing wrong with that, man. You can build a solid squad if they have the productive years that we hope they do.
Right. And at that price tag, they don't have to be amazing, right? They need to be functional fantasy starters. They need to basically not kill you, right? And what I think is they're both going to be pretty consistent when you say Melvin Gordon, right, and Carson, just based on the way their workloads are probably going to shake out this year.
The best ability is availability, and that's what we need out of those two guys. Someone who we don't know how well or how available he's going to be is our old pal Josh Jacobs. And that's because my brother from another mother just got signed with the Las Vegas Raiders. So the Raiders are pretty much that guy in your fantasy league who doesn't know how the game works, but he pays his league fee, so you put up with his crap. So Vegas is just going out of their way, as usual, to derail any momentum Josh Jacobs might have for fantasy. Forget the off-the-field stuff, which is plentiful for the Bama product. They added Kenyon Drake, who can not only steal early down work, but we know he can catch passes. He got $11 million guaranteed, Dwayne. Yeah, 11 mil guaranteed. I got to check him out at the family reunion, see if I can get a loan.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we're looking at
with this guy.
Yeah. What you're looking at now, and Josh Jacobs this is another example of a player you want to like, right? When you watch Josh Jacobs play, you can tell that he's talented. He's fun to watch. He's a tough runner, all those things. Great. But he's got a coach, for whatever reason, is hell bent on using 2 or 3 backs. They also re-signed Theo Riddick. I mean, and who knows how long, if that sticks. You still got Jalen Richard there. So it's just a real mess, man. And last year we saw it come to fruition. In certain game scripts, Josh Jacobs could take over and dominate. But in game scripts where they were trailing, game scripts where they had to pick up the pace, he wasn't getting on the field. And I think the other concern with Josh Jacobs now, right, is his running style, kind of similar to Chris Carson. He stays banged up a lot, Drake. He seems to always have problems with his shoulder. Mm-hmm. And so those are the kind of things that don't necessarily, we can't predict, right, that they're going to keep happening. All of a sudden he could just have a great year where he's not hurt at all. And I hope that's actually the case, for Josh Jacobs. But I think you just start adding everything up, just like what we talked about with DeAndre Swift. I mean, that's a lot of money to give Kenyon Drake. They're going to use him. And it would be different if Josh Jacobs tore it up last year all season, was the 1A and 1B and 1C back for his team and just destroyed, the league. But that's not the case. They were letting lesser players than Kenyon Drake spell Josh Jacobs, like Devontae Booker, right? He was spelling him. So at this point, to think that Drake's not going to spell him, I think, would be kind of crazy to think that.
Yeah, no question. Anybody else here at the running back position tie up some loose ends? I know you mentioned James Robinson a little bit. We've got a situation where Marlon Mack's back in Indy. So a little rapid fire. Anybody else on your mind?
Yeah, just a couple. I mean, obviously Chase Edmonds is left behind with Kenyon Drake gone. We've seen Chase Edmonds in very, very small sample sizes each of the last 2 years blow up, right? My gut says that Arizona is going to draft a back, or they're still going to do something else. But if they don't, or if they draft somebody really late, I mean, Edmonds could be a huge winner. So we'll have to see, because we know the pace of that offense. We know what they like to do. There's going to be a lot of opportunity there. So that's a guy to keep an eye on. You already mentioned Marlon Mack. Look, Jonathan Taylor looked great down the stretch. So I think it's going to be hard I don't think Mack's going to step back anywhere near into what his role was last year at the beginning of the year. But we are talking about a coach, right, with Frank Reich, that has been very willing. Right now, their offensive coordinator moved on. They're hanging out with you guys, right, in Philly now.
Good luck.
But yeah, but we know that Reich has been willing to use a committee, right? The biggest thing for Jonathan Taylor, right, is Nyheim Hines is not gone. He's there, right? Hines is the bigger issue than Mack. Now, Marlon Mack makes it even worse, because if they do rotate 3 backs, even if Mack's only on the field for 2 drives per game, but then you factor in Nyheim Hines' work, right? I think there's still going to be, I think there's going to be issues for Jonathan Taylor. My biggest thing with Jonathan Taylor right now, and I love him, it's just how high he is, right? He's ranked, in the top between 4 to 7 backs, right? Between most people right now. So he's going to be a high first round pick. So you just got to pay a lot, and you just got to realize that there is some potential downside. And one other name I'll throw out there, and again, they're probably going to draft someone. This is really early. We'll have to come back and hit all this stuff again after the draft. But LaMichael Pirine right now is basically kind of the last man standing with the Jets. And you've got a new offensive coordinator, Mike LaFleur, who's going to bring in Kyle Shanahan's scheme. We've talked on the show multiple times. We don't need to beat it anymore. But if you get to be a back in that kind of scheme, there's a lot of opportunity to have a great season. So Piron is just a guy to keep an eye on. If you're doing best balls right now and you can get him super late, he's a guy that I would be drafting now in best balls before the news hits. Again, most likely they'll draft a back, but they did draft him last year. So there's a chance that he carves out some portion, right, of that role and what will be a better running game for the Jets.
You know who I'd love to see there with the Jets? It just popped in my mind. We talked about him momentarily. I don't think he signed anywhere yet. Is it Philip Lindsay?
No, he signed with Houston.
Did he? Okay. I was thinking, I'm looking around. I'm like, did he sign?
Yeah, so Houston has David Johnson, Philip Lindsay,
right,
and Mark Ingram.
Good
so
God.
You have a team that's probably going to be terrible. Who knows what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson right now? I have no clue, how true all this stuff is. I'm also not a lawyer. So, I don't need to get into all that. But and the rumor is he still wants to be traded. Obviously, nobody's wanting to bite off a big contract and give up a bunch of draft picks with everything that's hanging over his head right now. But for me, everything just looks bad for Houston. Like you said, you want to avoid Detroit. Especially if Deshaun Watson's gone, I'm just completely going to be out on Houston altogether.
Our good pal, Drew Davenport from Football Guys, has a free article up over at footballguys.com talking about this. Drew is actually a lawyer and has been looking into this. Yeah. So check it out. Good stuff over there to support our pal, Drew Davenport. Going to move on to the wide receiver position now. And what are a few guys who might be winners and losers in this category, Dwayne?
Yeah, the trend kind of continues. It's less about people moving around, more about, people that are remaining. So my top two winners are T. Higgins and A.J. Brown, right? And it's not just one of these things where we're just saying, because the targets are there, they're going to be open. These are players that, right, have already, especially A.J. Brown, right? He's a beast. He's shown us that, if you can figure out ways to get him the ball and if he can stay healthy, his run after the catch, is phenomenal. He fits great in the scheme they have. Arthur Smith did move on, so that's a little bit of a concern. But Todd Downing, who they promoted, is probably going to run the same scheme. He comes from being under a ton of defensive-minded coaches, along the way, like Mike Zimmer. I think he even played under your boy Jim Schwartz, played under Jack Del Rio or coached under Jack Del Rio. So I expect the scheme to pretty much stay the same. But right now you've got, Corey Davis gone and Jonnu Smith gone. Mm-hmm. So AJ Brown's it, man. And the biggest problem for AJ Brown was because that offense runs such a slow pace, or it typically had. It got a little better last year, but because that offense ran such a slow pace from and not very many plays per game, and then you had to split up the market share right across these three guys, you needed to get a lot out of every target that you got from AJ Brown. So I think what's going to happen now is, I don't know how much his efficiency is going to drop. I think they're going to still have him doing the same things that he's normally done. But we could easily see a guy, have 35% market share, right, when it comes to the targets. So that gets me super excited about AJ Brown. And we know he's good enough to handle that, right? It's just, can they scheme it up? Can they make it all work? They're going to have to do something, right, else.
Josh Reynolds signed there, so get excited for that.
Yeah, well, the thing that Reynolds gives you, right, is he has shown at times that he can be a guy that can push the vertical limit, right, of the field, and that can help a guy like AJ Brown, who's running a lot of deep end routes. He runs deep routes as well, but a lot of his comes after the catch off of play action. So if you can run off the other safety with a guy like Josh Reynolds, my guess is they'll also draft somebody. I'm huge. I'm all in on AJ Brown this year. Then the other one is T. Higgins, just because we saw T. Higgins last year, Drake, really do everything. He did some run after the catch. He showed us that he can win the 50-50 ball. We saw him, get loose and get behind defenders. So he's kind of shown that he can play at all three levels of the field. You got AJ Green now gone, signing with the Cardinals. And AJ wasn't great, but he got plenty of targets, right? And so I think there's plenty of room with an ascending quarterback like Joe Burrow. We've got to get him healthy. But I think if you look at Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, T. Higgins is the one that profiles to me as the guy that can be the alpha. And so now you've got AJ Green gone. I think that just opens up opportunity for, as T. Higgins grows and he becomes better and better, there's just more room for him to take on, more of the offense now. So I think that's going to be huge for him because really, I mean, outside of that, they've got, Drew Sample at tight end. They throw it to the backs a little bit. Like this could be really a two-person funnel, right, on the offense with Boyd as well as T. Higgins. So I think T. Higgins is being undervalued right now, pretty much like in all formats. I think he's been undervalued in Dynasty. I think he's being undervalued, in redraft. Right now, he's ranked wide receiver 30, just looking at Fantasy Pros consensus. That's too low. He should not be below DJ Chark, Brandon Ayuk, Tyler Lockett, Will Fuller. I'm taking him over all those players, right?
Sure.
I think he has more upside than a guy that's ranked like number 20, Robert Woods, right? I think T. Higgins has upside to push into the top 12 if everything goes right, especially if Joe Burrow is healthy and he continues to ascend as a player. So those are my two big ones, Drake.
And we'll see what happens in the draft. They currently hold the 5th pick. And, there's talk of, maybe they get the big tackle out of Oregon. You can trade the pick, but they're going to have a shot, Dwayne, maybe to take either Kyle Pitts or Jamar Chase or Devonta Smith. So you could pair one of those guys on the other side, keep Boyd in the slot, Higgins over there. You're cooking with some gas, especially Kyle Pitts at tight end / animal, whatever position he's going to play.
Yeah, animal.
One of the jewels of the free agent class was Will Fuller, or was supposed to be at least. The former Texan, he's still facing a 1-game PED suspension when the season starts, signed with the Dolphins on a 1-year, $10.6 million deal. It'll be interesting to see how he pairs with Devontae Parker in this Miami offense. But the real question here, Dwayne, could be Tua Tagovailoa and his 5.89 yards per attempt, which ranked 39th in the league out of any QB who threw at least 100 passes. That's not good, folks. So Will Fuller could look a lot different than the guy we saw putting up top 10 digits with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I think Fuller's a loser, right? And the biggest part is what you just said, those last two words, Deshaun Watson. Like that's who he's been playing with. And Tua could certainly progress, right? He could be, a much better player this year. He could push the ball down the field more. But the bottom line is he's not going to be Deshaun Watson. There's only a few of those, right? And I don't think Tua is going to be one of those. I could be wrong, and I'd be happy to be wrong on that. But I think the odds are, right, you're downshifting in this move, just purely off of that alone. Yeah, I'm out on Will Fuller, especially right now. Like, looks like, Fantasy Pros consensus, he's wide receiver 24. No way I'm taking him there. I like him down. I'm fine with him as a wide receiver 3. I think he's probably going to be more like wide receiver 4 material this year. You're still probably going to have to deal with some injuries. You're going to figure out which weeks you're going to start him, which weeks are you not going to start him. Devonta Parker could still be the lead receiver on the team. This definitely hurts Preston Williams, a guy that, really flashed until he had gotten hurt. But he was trying to kind of come back last year. He had to battle some more injuries. So Preston Williams is a guy that I was kind of excited to see this coming year. So really, I think Will Fuller will definitely stunt, Preston Williams's growth, or at least what we get to see from a growth perspective. The coaches may see it off the field. We probably won't get to see it as much in 2021 on the field.
It pains me to say this, but the Giants are on a mad tear this free agency period. They landed Kenny Golladay, 4 years, $72 million. So really it is all on Daniel Jones at this point because the weapons in New York are fantastic. Golladay is an excellent deep threat, and Jones showed last year he can deliver that long ball. Now, according to PFF, Dwayne, which you may know something about, Jones was the most accurate deep ball thrower on passes over 20 yards in the league. So last year, Golladay, of course, only played 5 games for a pathetic Lions squad, but he's on the heels of 2 straight 1,000-yard seasons before that. As the alpha in New York, I'd love to hear, Dwayne, what you think of Golladay. When should he come off the board, and what's the whole outlook for this Giants offense that's just loaded with talent?
Yeah, I think Golladay ranks in a similar range to last year in preseason. I don't know that I see this as an upgrade necessarily, but I do think there is a chance, right, for him to be the true alpha of this receiver group. But Darius Slayton has flashed. We know that Evan Ingram, right, has flashed, in the past. Sterling Shepard has flashed in the past, right? Shepard's not an alpha, obviously, but there's still enough weapons that they could spread this around, right? And keep it
right.
Because here's the thing with, in Detroit, Golladay hit a lot of big plays, but, he was hanging around in that 20, 22, 23% range, right? We know Jason Garrett doesn't run a super, advanced, fast offense. So there's always the chance that, they kind of go into their shell if their offense gets better and they start leading in games. There's no guarantee they're going to keep their foot on the gas. So I think there's still questions with Golladay, but I do believe that if he does have a chance to kind of break out and maybe have one of those, true, I'm the alpha on the team, 26, 27, 28%, right, of the targets, I think it definitely could happen, right? So where you're getting him right now, he typically, is going in the wide receiver 2 range. I'm okay with that. I do think the biggest winner you already named, the biggest winner for the Giants is Daniel Jones, just because of all the weapons that I just, talked about. We can talk about tight ends here in a minute. They did sign Kyle Rudolph, which is really more of an issue for Evan Ingram. But I think Golladay is probably priced right now. But you could also make an argument to me, Drake, that, man, I just don't trust Daniel Jones, and so I'm out on Golladay. The problem is we've looked at this in the past. I've done the research on the show. Basically, your quarterback has to be absolutely terrible for him to truly drag down, right, the fantasy value of the receiver. And they have to be unwilling. It has to be a quarterback that's unwilling to take chances. We know Daniel Jones is willing to take chances. He's willing to throw a pick and turn around and come right back and throw into double coverage again to get it to his guy. So I don't think that part's going to be an issue. So I think there is an opportunity for Golladay to have a little bit of upside, but it's mostly, to me, it's already priced in where he's going, but I'm okay with the cost right now.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of narratives too. The receiver changing teams. Is there an off season? Can he create any chemistry? Because we know Jones already has a rapport with Slayton and with Shepard and all the other guys there. And the Giants defense is pretty good.
Yeah. I'm pretty surprised that Detroit let him get away, to be honest. Like Marvin Jones, you kind of expected. It's like, move on. But Detroit, this tells you their mindset, man. They're like they're like where the Dolphins were probably 2 years ago, right? It's like, let's just burn the house down and start over.
A pair of elite receivers were franchised, so they're sticking around for their same teams this season. Chris Godwin lands back with the Bucs, trying to repeat, and Allen Robinson is still in Chicago. So we know what we have in Godwin with Brady, and it could be the same basic offense. But what are we expecting now from A-Rob with your boy Andy Dalton pulling the trigger in the Windy City?
Dalton could technically be the best quarterback. It's funny, we keep saying this every year. That's how bad it's been for Allen Robinson. Like last year, last year, we were like, oh man, well, he could get to play with Nick Foles. That'll be the best quarterback he's ever played with. And now we're like, oh man, Andy Dalton, that could be the best quarterback he's ever played with. That's like how sad it is for Allen Robinson. We should get him on the show. But I think at worst, it's neutral. If Andy Dalton comes out and plays well, it's positive. Am I excited about it for the Bears overall as a football move? Not really. But for me, it keeps Allen Robinson's, status intact, right? This guy, man, the sad thing for Robinson is if he could truly play with somebody that could unlock like all levels of his talent, you're probably looking at a top 6, receiver multiple years in a row. But the guy's going to get the targets. The work's going to be there. So I have no issue with Allen Robinson. It's neutral to a slight upgrade versus his situation last year.
This is a fun one. So longtime favorite of the hustle, Curtis Samuel has a new home and a new outlook for fantasy. The former Buckeye inked a 3-year deal with the Jets. He's reunited with his old Carolina OC and head coach. And pairing him now with another Buckeye, Terry McLaurin, on the other side, gives the football team some mind-blowing speed. They also have a new signal caller with Fitzmagic in the house. Ryan Fitzpatrick signed a 1-year deal. So we know he has no issue pushing the ball down the field, and it's going to be a much-needed relief for Samuel versus noodle-armed Teddy Bridgewater. So the sky's the limit. I mean, boy, oh boy, I think if you use him rushing like he did last year, the guy had like 200 yards rushing and a couple of scores. let's just use this guy. Let's have some fun. This offense looks legit here in Washington.
Yeah, and they have a really good defense. Their defense could be the best defense in the league. So, Washington, just sitting here talking about this, like, it's just rolling through my mind. Like, if you wanted to place like a futures bet on who, I'm guessing you get pretty good odds right now on Washington winning the NFC East, but they probably have as much of a chance as anybody as we sit here right now, thinking about how good their defense is, and thinking about, what their offense could be. You've got Antonio Gibson maturing, like you already mentioned, Terry McLaurin. We've got Logan Thomas, who broke out last year at tight end, and Fitzmagic, who's not great, but to your point, like he can ball, right? He can push the ball down the field. He's not he's a noodle arm guy as well, but he knows how to anticipate. Like, he knows how to anticipate when to get the ball out, get it in the air, so that he can make those deep throws. Unlike, what we see with, Teddy Bridgewater, right? Who has to stare it down and then decide to throw it and he can't hit it. I think Samuel is a guy right now that, if you can get him as your wide receiver 4, I like it, because I think there is upside for him to work his way into wide receiver 3, maybe wide receiver 2 territory. Jay Moyer, friend of the show, he loves Curtis Samuel, everything about him. So I hope he gets used more in the role like what we saw the year before in Carolina, but he just didn't have. He had one of those terrible quarterbacks, and who was quarterback at that time? Allen. There's so many. There's too many Allens. There's too many Kyle Allen, right? Yep. The former Texas Aggie. He was one of those quarterbacks that truly could just drag the whole team down because he was so bad for stretches. So Curtis Samuel won't have to deal with that anymore. But I hope he's used more like that. So it is Scott Turner, right, who was there for that offense and knows Curtis Samuel very well. And what I want to see is Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin being used more interchangeably, right? Let a different guy stretch the field each play. Let both of them get to work underneath, intermediate. Let both of them attack all areas of the field. If that happens, then I think that could be very good, right, for Curtis Samuel. I really don't want to see him as a gimmick player anymore. I'm fine. You give him a few carries, let him get some rushing yards. But my thought is, like, let him unlock, right, that intermediate and deep part, right, of his game. And he's worked on his route running, all those things like Jay's talked about and broken down on film for us. So I'm excited for Curtis Samuel. I think the big thing that could hold them back the most is how good is Washington's defense going to be, right? Because we do have Ron Rivera. He's willing to be conservative if he needs to, right? So we're going to need some teams to be able to step up and actually challenge Washington's defense to really unlock, I think, big upside for McLaurin and Samuel. But like I said, I like him as a wide receiver 4 right now, Drake.
How about a few quick hits here? Juju, he's staying in Pittsburgh. Corey Davis signs with the Jets. Any thoughts on anybody else we might have missed?
I think on Juju, the biggest thing is I think we've all seen, like, I would say from a dynasty perspective, someone that was valued very highly at this time last year, how quickly things can change. There just wasn't a market for him. So he ends up going back to Pittsburgh, but only on a 1-year deal. So I think the league at this point just sees Juju as a slot receiver, and those are a dime a dozen. So I think this is bad, right, for Juju overall. It's also bad this year for Claypool, right, and Deontay Johnson, because had you had Juju gone and out of the mix and you're just dealing with James Washington or whoever else they might draft, I think there was a better chance for Claypool and, Deontay Johnson, if he could stay healthy, right, to really see a little bit of an uptick, if they were to grow, right, if they were to both show growth. I think Deontay Johnson's capable of a 100-catch season. We've already seen that, right? He can get open pretty much at will. He's just got to stay healthy. I think Claypool's the guy that, they did a lot to scheme him up last year and move him around. We've got to see, can he truly just line up outside and just win on his own? I think that he probably can. But now we're going to have a deal where it's probably still going to be split between 3 of these guys. It's going to make it tough, for any of them to be true high-end fantasy assets. And if I had to put a chip down on one of them, it would still be Deontay Johnson, because we saw last year, if he had been healthy, right, he could have been in that wide receiver 1 mix.
If you're watching on YouTube, and we hope you are, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you're trying to find us on there, just search Fantasy Football Hustle. You'll see our beautiful new banner. And there's actually a link on there to our apparel store. Shout out to our guy, 5 Yard Lee, who helped us put that all together. It looks beautiful. And, leave a comment. like a few videos, peruse around there. We got a lot of great stuff that's going to be coming up for 2021 on the YouTube page. So, hey, shout out to all the guys in the chat room who are talking. We really appreciate it. And as the season goes along, we'll be interacting with you guys. But we're moving on to tight end right now, Dwayne, at winners and losers on the tight end front.
Yeah, I'll give the tight ends one last thing on receiver. I forgot to mention Gabriel Davis. Like, I know they just signed Emmanuel Sanders, but we've seen Sanders is deteriorating. So John Brown moving on to the Raiders was really that field stretcher. Diggs was too last year. But if Buffalo is intent, right, on running the same kind of offense this year, which is basically we don't run the ball at all, there is enough to go around in this offense potentially if Allen, continues to play in the way he did before. So Gabriel Davis is a guy that, came in as a rookie, flashed, did some good things. So there could be an opportunity. I like Davis as a late round pick. I think he's just going to move up draft boards as we go. As far as tight end, man, some things broke really well. Because tight end, unlike receiver, and these names I'm about to name, they were splitting and sharing time, which meant they were literally off the field, right? Unless they were running 12 personnel, which most teams, 12 personnel, we talk about it a lot, but not many teams are running 12 personnel really a ton, right? If somebody runs at 30%, that's a lot. We'll talk about Jonnu, Smith and Hunter Henry here in a minute and what the Patriots plans are. But the three players that I think moved up the most in my mind, again, players that got to stay where they are, but these are all young players that have flashed, and you could say they're ascending. But I think T.J. Hawkinson. Not only did they get rid of Jesse James, so he's going to be able to be on the field more. They got rid of their best two receivers, so in Marvin Jones and Golladay. And so if he can continue to take a step forward, the opportunity is going to be there for him to be a centerpiece of the offense. He obviously still has to earn that. He's been a little bit up and down. We've seen him flash around the red zone. He hasn't quite been the player, Drake, I think we hoped he would, working, running after the catch, working down the seam. I think he's been good, but not great. So with Hawkinson, but we know tight ends can take a while to mature and really come into their own in the league. So I think Hawkinson is a guy this year, though, that could easily push to be in the top 6. If he can take his game to the next level, the opportunity will be there for him to be the centerpiece of the offense. Irv Smith, Kyle Rudolph's gone. So he's going to be on the field all the time. It's still going to be, I know Gary Kubiak moves on, but his son is taking over as the coordinator. So, it's still going to be a Kubiak-style offense, which is designed to create all these mismatches against middle linebackers, or just linebackers, period, safeties. And we know Irv Smith is a very talented player from a standpoint of, his athletic profile. He can be a mismatch in those situations. Plus, you add the scheme and all of the hesitation, misdirection, everything they do through their running game that creates that pause, for the defender that's having to cover. Irv Smith, I think Irv Smith also is a guy that could push to be a top 6 tight end this year. And then my last one is Tyler Higbee. You have Gerald Everett moving on. His is a little less clear because they have spent a little bit of draft capital with Bryce Hopkins, so he could potentially step in to take on a little bit more of a role. But as we sit today, I would say Higbee is the other one. All three of those players could be in a situation where they're now going to be playing 80 to 90% of the snaps, whereas before they were playing in the 60% range, which is a huge jump. That also means their routes are also going to go up, right? Because they're going to be on the field more often, which just means there's more chances for them to be involved in the offense. That's the thing with tight ends. It's a little different than receivers, right? Whenever you're having to split time, there's almost a little more upside because before you just weren't on the field, period. So now you're going to be on the field more. So I like all three of those. Honorable mention, Drake, I would give to Adam Trotman from New Orleans. He's still really raw. We have no clue what the guy's capable of. So, but he's going to get a chance, right? Which is what you're looking for. You got Jared Cook moving on. He signed with the Chargers who let Hunter Henry go. So I think that's the other one, but I'm less sure about that one, right? But his price tag is going to be less as well because, Troutman's a guy that they could try to give him the opportunity, but he may not be able to earn it, right? He may not be able to earn the targets. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll see what his quarterback situation is down there. Another guy to mention is Dallas Goedert. Zach Ertz will be traded or released here in the coming days. So, he'll have every opportunity on an Eagles team that will be trailing for most of the season. In New Orleans, the Patriots double-dipped and signed the two best free agents on the market. First, they snagged former Titan Jonnu Smith on a 4-year, $50 million deal. Then they followed it up the next day with a 3-year, $37.5 million contract for Hunter Henry. Throw in Cam Newton returning on a low-end deal. We aren't really sure who the quarterback's going to be in New England, but we know that this offense is going to be a grind. Last year, Dwayne, one of the most run-heavy offenses in the league. They finished 30th in passing yards per game. And with Cam's limitations, not only are these tight end signings, something to talk about for the offense, but they also went out and added a couple of, we'll call, complementary players in Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne. So this offense, everyone wants to talk about, the old Patriot days of Gronkowski and Hernandez. And I don't necessarily think we're going back to that, but what are your thoughts on this Pats offense?
Yeah, I mean, we know that schematically they know how to take advantage, right, of these types of players. The problem is you don't have Tom Brady anymore, right? So that's the big difference. You've got Cam Newton, and based on the contract they gave Cam, they're probably going to add some. I won't be surprised if they draft a quarterback. But I think that's the big issue, right, is you don't have Brady, who made mismatches into what they were, right? Because he could read the defense so well, he knew how to get Gronk or Hernandez into the mismatch he wanted. And he was smart enough to do all that at the line. And I'm not saying that Cam's not, smart. He may be able to do all that, but we just haven't seen him run that type of offense and be super effective. And there's still questions right around his shoulder. He looked better last year. In the game against Seattle, early in the season, Cam Newton looked great, right? And then everything just kind of fell apart. And part of that could have been just because their offensive weapons were terrible. Jacoby Myers was really the best option they had. N'Keal Harry didn't really step up and do anything. Edelman got hurt. So, the deck was definitely stacked against Cam. So I give the Patriots credit, right? They're trying. I just don't think a lot about Kendrick Bourne. To me, he's kind of like having another Jacoby Myers hanging around. It's like, I don't really understand that signing. They don't have anybody right now that can stretch the field, Drake. That bothers me. You need somebody that can really push the safeties off to do something with these tight ends. So it kind of sucks, man. I wish they would have just signed one or the other is the way I look at this. I'm worried they're going to really basically cannibalize each other's production because we're going to be in a lesser version of the old New England offense. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up, fairly close together like what we saw with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez in the past, but they were both tight end ones, right? We could see both of these players end up being borderline tight end twos. Borderline, when I say tight end twos, like just outside the tight end one, and we may never know which week to play either player. There's a chance that they do better than that. I think the other thing that we could see, Drake, is they may want to be more like, say, the Ravens offense, right? Using these multiple tight ends, using a running quarterback like Cam Newton, and really trying to win by being more of a power team, right? And so they do have two viable options, at tight end that they can throw the ball to, but that also allows them to use a lot of those heavy packages where they can come out and run the ball a lot as well. So I think New England's a team we're just going to have to keep an eye on and see really what are they trying to do. And we know New England's a team that could literally change that game plan every week based on who their opponent is. Absolutely. One week it could be this exotic kind of smash mouth game. Tight ends, only get 3 targets each, but they're on the field a lot. The next game, it could be, we're going to air it out, right? And maybe Jonnu Smith isn't on the field as much, or he is, and they're both valuable that week. But it's something where there's just going to be a lot of variables, and I think it's going to be tough to pinpoint, when we're going to be able to start those two players.
And guys at Underdog see it the same way we do. Their ADPs right now, they're coming off the board respectively. Henry at tight end 14 and Jonnu Smith at tight end 16. You're getting them in the late 120s, early 130s in terms of overall pick. And again, remember, Cam loves to throw the ball in the middle of the field, and these guys are going to be there. And hey, I don't want either one, to be honest. I said this. I was on a show the other day with our good pal Jim Coventry, and he said, which one would you want for fantasy? And I go, to be honest, I'd rather take my shot somewhere else. I don't want tight end is such a wasteland anyways. Halfway through the year, we're going to be dying finding any clown off the waiver wire that we can throw in because we didn't draft Kelsey or Kittle. I'd rather take my shots with Dallas Goedert or Noah Fant or TJ Hawkinson than either of these guys.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I mean, I think this could be the year where we really do have several tight ends join. I don't know if it'll be elite, but I think, every year we talk about these kind of things and you'll hear people, oh, this is a really deep tight end class or a really deep year at receiver. I really do think that we've got these younger talents. Now, they may not all step up, but you named the other one, right? Once Zach Ertz is gone, Dallas Goedert, TJ Hawkinson, Irv Smith Jr. Irv Smith Jr. is the one that's getting the most disrespect right now, right? I mean, he's ranked pretty low across the board. He's a guy that you can get at the end of your best ball drafts, or closer to the end, the second half of your best ball drafts right now. And that'd be a guy that I'd be targeting. A guy that's kind of on the opposite direction is Evan Ingram, because now they add Kyle Rudolph. So, if they go to 11 personnel, they can put Sterling Shepard in the slot because you're going to have Golladay and Slayton on the outside. Well, what does that do? That potentially takes away Evan Ingram's spot in the slot, depending on the game plan, because he played a lot of his time not in line last year. And now you have Kyle Rudolph coming in, who's probably going to get a lot of the inline snaps. And so what you could see, the problem for Evan Ingram this year could be, you could see his routes run per drop down into that 60% range, right? And we've seen in the past, that's really tough to overcome unless your name is Mark Andrews, right? And you've just got crazy touchdown efficiency. So I'm really worried about Evan Ingram this year. He's a guy that I'm moving down my board just because there's too many different ways he could be out of the game plan. And we know that he's got an injury history. I love the player, love the talent, think he's a huge mismatch. But there's just questions now because he could be fighting for snaps in the slot. He could be fighting for the regular tight end snaps. It's just too much up in the air for me for Evan Ingram, unless his price cools off some.
And we know the Giants' line is kind of their Achilles heel right now. So you could have Kyle Rudolph essentially coming in to be their third tackle and really help to get Saquon Barkley off. We saw that early last year with Gronk. Remember, we talked about Gronk.
Yeah.
We're like, oh my God, he's not running any routes. He's just in there blocking the whole time. So
yeah,
very easily could see that. Any other tight ends you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I think, you got to mention Gerald Everett, right? We've not really seen the Seahawks fully utilize, a tight end. They've really always had more of a rotation. Everett's been stuck in a rotation really with Tyler Higbee, but he's a player that we have seen flash from time to time. He's had his own injury issues. He's the kind of player that profiles well, right, for the Seahawks. They like these spark guys. He's a very athletic tight end on paper. So I think Everett is a guy we got to keep an eye on. He didn't get a huge deal. I believe it was just a 1-year deal. But Russ Wilson really needs a third guy. The problem for him is going to be if they really do go back to let's just ground and pound. Everett's not the best blocker. That could keep him off the field, and they could slow their pace. There's less passes to go around. And then Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are going to be the top two options on the team. So you really need them to air it out like they did last year. And if they went more to that style of offense, even if it was just out of necessity because of their defense struggles, then I think there's some potential upside for a guy like Gerald Everett because he can be on the field more. And really what you saw last year, the Seahawks offense, it just kind of died right down the stretch. And I think a big part of it is you need to have 3 players that can truly attack a secondary. And I think even though they had 2 really good ones with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, they just struggled to get consistency out of a third player. I think David Moore is a really good, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, but for whatever reason, that just didn't work out, with them being able to truly attack all areas of the field. Now they are a team that likes to rotate players a lot, but I would say Gerald Everett's a guy to keep an eye on, Drake.
We never got your official word because we weren't doing shows at that point, but there was a big trade that went down. I'm sure everyone is aware. Matthew Stafford was dealt for Jared Goff, so now Stafford is in LA with the Rams, and unfortunately Jared Goff is sitting in Detroit looking at the pile of garbage that is left at Ford Field. So I just want to get your thoughts on this. What do you think Stafford brings to this Sean McVay offense? Could we see it open up a little more? And, Jared Goff is, Jared Goff.
Yeah, I think you could see it open up a lot more. I think, McVay basically had to scheme the offense to some extent, around Goff. And I think it just became predictable. I think Matt Stafford really puts you in a situation where you can be far less predictable. and the type of routes, the type of setups you're going to use. I think Stafford will also get the benefit, right, of using more play action. He'll have to operate from under center more, which he hasn't done a lot here lately, but I think he's certainly adept, and he'll be able to do it. He's probably even still a little bit more athletic than people, realize. I'm not saying like he's like, this great athlete, but I think he's decent. And I think it's going to unlock potential for Robert Woods. I think it's going to unlock upside potentially for Cooper Kupp. And I think for Tyler Higbee, I think it's a plus for all three of those players. I think it's a plus for the entire Rams offense. I think you're going to have an opportunity to score more. And I think it's going to allow the playbook to be much more versatile and adaptive based on what they want to do against each opponent.
Steve Stifler said it best. You don't score until you score. For you big American Pie fans out there. Any other thoughts on the quarterback situations? Of course, Carson Wentz was traded to the Colts, and we have a situation now in New Orleans where Taysom Hill is going to battle it out with Jameis Winston.
No, I don't really have anything else. I think the Wentz thing is definitely going to be interesting, right? Because that's Wentz is a player that's shown, two different extremes, right, of himself on the field. Hopefully it just comes down to, it just wasn't a good fit anymore in Philly, and he can get things rolling, with Indy. And for Indy, like, if it works out, it's great, right? They had the unfortunate situation where they had a great franchise quarterback in Andrew Luck, and he decided to retire, right? Which is just a tough break, So if Wentz can come in and even be 75% of Andrew Luck, I think it's a team, that can be pretty decent. We'll have to see what goes on with their skill positions, but you'll have Michael Pittman in his second year. T.Y. Hilton's not been re-signed at this point, but he also hasn't signed with anyone else. You'll have Paris Campbell coming back, from injury, but who knows what's going to happen with him. I think we'll have to see what they're going to do, in the draft. I think that's going to be a key, and that's another team that will rotate players a ton, I mean, they'll just rotate guys on and off of the field. So there's not anything that I can just, point to and say, oh my gosh, getting Wentz makes me so excited about player X, right? I think we may have some more takes like that, right? As the preseason moves forward and as we get closer to games and we do more research. But right now I don't have anything that I feel, like I've got to get on the table and pound my fist for.
And if there's anything that comes to your mind out there in listener land and you want to reach us on Twitter, I am at Drake Fantasy. Dwain is, of course, at Dwain McFarland. The show is on Twitter and Instagram at FF Hustle. Check out that shirt store, Viridian Global. Our boys over there, they got hats, they got hoodies, they got shirts. There's some cool swag, man. The official Dwain McFarland Analytical Assassin shirt is now available. So we're going to have to get one down there to you in Texas, Dwain. And we're going to be doing some giveaways. I've already got it set up there. We got some free shirts that are going to be ready to be shipped out all across the country. So be sure you are subscribed to the podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. And, of course, over on YouTube, click that subscribe button. So for Mr. McFarland down there in the great state of Texas, I am Brian Drake. We'll see you guys soon. And don't forget, folks, never get out hustled. We'll see you guys. Take